welcome back to the van build. This part of the project, I am finally installing my batteries and doing my solar wiring. I'm going to show you exactly how I did that. I started off by wiring my chassis ground. I have scraped off the paint that is on the van in order to get a good connection. As you can see, this is just on top of my wool insulation. I'm using 1/aught battery cable, and this runs through the van wall a little bit and then in through the sidewall of a box that I have built for my electrical. A lot of work went into doing this battery solar wiring install, and I have to say probably 90% of the time, this is what it looked like. Me sitting down, looking at instructions a million times. Now I have another video where I installed the solar panels, and if you'd like, go ahead and watch that first. But here I am up on the roof, and all these memories are coming back to me from this day. I was very overwhelmed. So I know my face looks serious because I was really nervous. I don't have any previous electrical experience. Yes, I've done a lot of research and triple and quadruple checked everything, but I was really nervous, and at times it felt like my brain was not working properly. This is a cable gland, which is going to allow things to seal up tightly when the cables pass through the roof. You can see this rubber grommet is going to keep everything tight and water out. And then this is a pre-drilled hole that I used a metal step bit to drill the hole, and I'm feeding the ends of the solar wire that is going to be connected to my solar charge controller down through the roof and into that battery box that I showed you earlier. This entry gland comes with screws, but I do not believe it is best just to drill screws through sheet metal, so I am using these bolts and nuts and just pushing them down through the pre-drilled holes. This was extremely hard to snap this cover on. I probably will never use this brand cable seal again, I'm not gonna lie. You can see here are the PV cables coming down through the roof. I'm putting a little Loctite on these bolts, and then I am using a washer, a lock washer, and a nut. And I don't have anyone on the roof to hold the top of that bolt down, so I came up with a little trick on the fly. I'm using needle nose pliers to hold the bottom of the bolt, and then I am using a wrench to tighten the nut. Much needed lemonade break. I have been obsessed lately with water, basil, honey, fresh squeezed lemon juice, and a tiny bit of salt. Shake it in a mason jar with ice. It is heaven. The install of my solar charge controller. This basically is the device that takes all of the power from the PV solar cables that are attached to my solar panels on the roof and decides how much power it is going to push to the other components of my electrical system. Next up is my master cutoff switch for my solar power. This is the rail that the cutoff switch will snap onto. So you drill in that bracket first. And I'm just drilling that in, putting 2 screws. And there you go, it snaps into place. Gorgeous, if I don't say so myself. Wire size is going to vary for everyone's system depending on how much solar you have on your roof and depending on how many volts your system is. I have 750 watts of solar on my roof, and I have a 24 volt system. My batteries are 230 amps each, giving me a total of 460 amps at 24 volt. Just for comparison, that would be 920 amp hours if you have a 12 volt system. Whether or not to use a ferrule in the solar charge controller, I literally have looked online and gotten all kinds of answers, yes and no. I'm going to go ahead and use a non-insulated ferrule because the insulated ferrule doesn't allow the wire to go deep enough up into the solar charge controller. I'm able to estimate how much I'm going to strip off of the wire insulation by marking it with a little Sharpie, seeing how long that ferrule is, giving the wire a little twist, popping that ferrule on, and then using these ratcheting ferrule crimpers. Ta-da! Pull test. Perfect. And then I'm just repeating the process for the positive wire and stripping the wire with these cable cutters. And boy, oh boy, every single time I'm able to strip wire without cutting any of the little stranded pieces inside, I am very excited. Crimping it on, and there you go. Next is my Lynx distributor. Here I am trying to decide perfect placement. This was really, really hard. Even though I drew everything up ahead of time, kind of estimating where wires would go, how long wire runs were going to be, how everything would play with one another, and what should be next to each other was really difficult. And I am attaching it to the sidewall of this battery box. Note right now, this Lynx distributor does not have that front cover on it that you normally see. That kind of looks more like that blue cover, like the solar charge controller. And that is because that front cover comes off and you can access everything on the inside. This takes 4 screws. I'm using more of a pan head screw and a washer to try and distribute that weight a little bit more evenly. This is super heavy. Here I am stripping the wire from the ground wire that I attached to the chassis earlier and using this lug crimper to crimp the wire on and then adding some heat shrink. I got this heat gun on Amazon. It's by Black & Decker. It works perfect. And then I'm using some alcohol just to clean the contacts of that lug. I'm attaching the ground cable to the negative bus bar on the Lynx using a bolt, a washer, a lock washer, and a nut. This particular Lynx uses M8 bolts. And I only know that because I've had to buy a ton of lugs, and the lugs are 5/16. Next up is some aluminum rail. I don't really know what this stuff is called. And I'm going to make this into a rectangle shape using 4 different pieces. And this is going to hold my batteries in place. First, I'm drilling holes into the aluminum with my metal drill bit. And then I am using a countersink bit to countersink those holes so the screws would sit flush into the metal. So I started out by placing 2 pieces of the aluminum rail and making sure it was square. This was really hard as each of these batteries are 100 pounds and the batteries needed to be sitting on top of the aluminum rail. I first needed to make sure it was like the right width to accommodate both batteries. So it was a lot of back and forth here. Here I am screwing down the first aluminum rail. And I decided to go ahead and use some lashing straps. I think that's what they're called, to give some extra security to hold these batteries down. The lashing straps went underneath the aluminum rail, and then I screwed through the lashing strap and into the aluminum rail and into the battery box. It literally took all my might to lift these batteries. I have a bunch of calluses from doing this. This was really sad. One of the ratchet straps, I didn't center in the right way, so when it was tightened, the buckle was too far to the edge of the wall of the battery box, so I couldn't use it. There was no way I was gonna unscrew all of that, move these 200-pound batteries. I just couldn't do it. So one strap is gonna have to be enough. Here I'm using some zip ties and little 3M sticky plastic things to secure the solar wiring to the roof of the van. And here, the positive and negative PV solar cables from the solar panels down through the roof, and they come into this master shutoff switch. And I'm just tightening it with a screwdriver. Here I'm stripping 2 more wires. This is positive and negative to go from the bottom of the solar on-off switch to connect into the solar charge controller. Next up, I am going to be wiring my batteries. This was really, really exciting for me. I practiced a lot stripping battery cable, crimping on lugs, and I think I have actually perfected it. And for anyone who is going to be wiring their electrical system for their van, you can definitely do it. I would just recommend getting extra battery cable and really practicing stripping your wire, practicing getting really good crimps, and getting a good lug crimper. This one here is amazing. I had a really hard time finding a good lug crimper. All the ones on Amazon, even for 1/0 and 2/0 wire, just weren't good enough. This one is like $150, but so worth it. I will link it in the description. I attached the lugs onto the M8 bolts that come on these Epic batteries and then tighten them to spec. This little torque wrench on Amazon has been a game changer. I'm using 2 fuse holders that will sit on the battery terminals, and then there is a fuse that sits on top of that fuse holder, and then the whole thing sits on top of the battery. Also tightened to spec. There's particular specs for these fuse holders. So you have your fuse holder, you have your fuse, and then on top of the fuse goes the positive wire onto your battery. This is one end of the positive cabling that's going to go to the battery, and the other side is connecting to the master on-off switch. And then on the second bolt that's on the master on-off switch, it's going to the positive bus bar on the Lynx. And that's held with a washer, lock washer, nut. And I'm tightening this to spec. There it is. all connected, and snapping it into the holder. It's crazy to look at this because I've been watching van videos for years, and finally I have something that looks very familiar all my own. This is the cable that is going to connect the smart shunt for the battery monitor to the negative bus bar on the Lynx. This is going to tell me everything I need to know about the state of my battery. I'm loosening a nut on the bus bar in order to be able to install a fuse. I'm using a mega fuse 40 amps. That goes on first, and then we're going to go ahead and put the positive wire from the solar charge controller and the negative wire, washer, lock washer, and nut in that order. I hope y'all will subscribe and follow along in this whole van build journey that I'm doing completely on my own. This is my absolute dream, and I really appreciate y'all watching.